everyone. My name is John Kiwanuka, and if this is your first time joining us, welcome to the SuitCASE. Our mission is to provide an open space for all parties involved in the healthcare traveling world to discuss victories, challenges, and everyday experiences while being on the road. If you have already joined us for our past episodes, you already know that our goal is to provide an open dialogue for travelers to hear unique stories from former and present travelers. So, why are we doing this? It's quite simple. Over the past few decades, traveling healthcare workers have become a necessity for so many hospitals and healthcare facilities throughout this country. In the same sense, it's slowly created an unbelievable amount of friction and tension between staffing companies, clients, and travelers due to miscommunications, or maybe just even a lack of communication entirely from all of those parties involved. So our next phase of the SuitCASE has the purpose of bringing attention and understanding to red flags within the travel healthcare setting. We will be speaking with guests from every side of the staffing experience, with our first guest being none other than Miss Tina Lipscomb. Now, Tina currently is serving as a lead RN case manager for a hospital system in North Carolina and is a former healthcare traveler of 7 years. Tina, how are you doing today?
I am doing great and so happy to be here to talk about this particular topic.
I am so happy to have you here. You have no idea. I will ask you two quick questions before we dive into this. Are you ready to raise some red flags, and are you ready to help some people?
Absolutely.
All right. So without further ado, let's get into this. Now, when we talk about red flags within hospitals, within the staffing experience, within travel, I'm not sure what your experience really was when you were traveling for 7 years, but I know there have been challenges, and then there have also been wonderful stories. But with us focusing on those red flags, the first thing we'll do is we'll focus on the staffing companies. From your perspective as a former traveler, there can be red flags, especially when we talk about communication. So, one of the primary things we want to start with is your recruiter's motivation. What is their motivation? And then at the end of the day, are they genuinely invested in your well-being? So if you could add to that, I'd love to learn more about your perspective on it.
So I see the relationship with the recruiter as being a partnership. You're choosing a work partner. So if you think about what you would expect in a work partner, you usually want that to be a win-win for both parties. And you also expect both parties, both your partner, to have your back, just like you have their back. So that relationship needs to be, what does each party want to gain from that relationship? So if that recruiter seems to only be focused on, all I care about is filling that assignment, I don't care about who you are, anything that comes up in the discussion, that is a huge red flag, because that is not a partnership. That is a one-way relationship, and that is not how this should be approached.
I agree with that. Now, we've also had people in the past just speak to, my recruiter can't give me a straight answer. And, it always sounds like they're trying to sell me something. And I know we've talked about this in the past, and you have a story that I know you wanted to share based on conversations. And I know you told me to remind you of the redwood. So I'd love for you to add more to that, with our second question being, or second red flag being, that lack of getting a straight answer.
So I told John about this story of an example. Is I had received a phone call from a recruiter asking about was the redwood trees of Northern California. I proceeded to tell him that I was not interested. And rather than respectfully hearing that, he got that sound of desperation in his voice. And we all know what that sounds like. It's that salesman pitch. We've all had those phone calls from people or interactions with people that we know have their own agenda. And that is because immediately This is not you're not developing a partnership or a relationship. You're getting a sense that somebody is trying to sell you something. And again, going back to that original thought, this is a partnership. This should be a win-win for both parties. And if you were not getting straight answers and a response, that is an enormous red flag. And you should immediately either back off if you want to, or maybe even speak up and say something and say, hey, I don't think you're giving me a straight answer. What the heck is going on? What are, and deal with it.
Great. Now, in terms of the relationship, what are some tangibles that you would expect from a recruiter to help you kind of build rapport? Are there things that they could say to you, things that they could ask you that would help with that?
I would probably first off ask them what are their expectations of me? And then I would ask them I would say to them, these are my expectations of you, such as I expect you that if I have a problem on the assignment, that you do have my back, that I can call you and we can talk it through and try to problem solve. I expect you to stay in touch with me. I expect you to return my phone calls, my text, emails, that you basically set up a system of what is both of you as a partnership, what is your desired system of communication. I would also ask the recruiter, as you're talking with them, again, trying to sense, we're going into the travel world. Yes, a lot of us are focused on money and benefits and all of that, but we're also filling a huge need. We're filling a need in these hospitals. And so we go in, we're trying to serve a client. We want that client to ultimately feel good about us as a person going in and helping them, but also the company that we are representing. We are representing that staffing agency, and we want that to be, again, a win-win for everyone involved. So how does that recruiter respect that? Or are they just, again, more concerned with, I just need a body in that job and I need to move on to the next person?
Yeah. So, and that's something that I see quite a bit. And
Yes.
me personally, especially at the beginning of my career, you're taught that the money is all that matters. But what we forget is that people are involved. And, when we talk about transactions are for products, relationships are for people. So when we're in the people to people business, that's a big, big deal. And one thing that I had to learn over the years, specifically as we walked into case management staffing. So, very, very good point. Thank you for
And
sharing.
I want to add one more thing to that. I
Sure.
think it's also about the job fit. In all of my years of case management, whether it's a traveler or whether the position I'm in now, and I'm going to share with you an example that just recently happened. The recruiter was so focused on filling that spot, they did not look at the fit of the right person in that job. And this happens all the time. So what do you think happens if you put the wrong person in the wrong job? They're not going to succeed. So it's an immediate failure. And that happened very recently with a position in my area. This lady actually sat behind me. It was a horrible fit. She knew it was a horrible fit. I knew it was a horrible fit. The hospital I'm working for knew it was a horrible fit. She hung in there about 3 weeks and then was gone.
Yeah.
But that's a waste. If you think about it from each party's perspective, that is such a waste. Because number one, that could have been a really good traveler. And she might have been a really good traveler, but she failed on that assignment.
Mm-hmm.
So in her mind, that's a failure and a huge ding to her self-esteem. And how is that going to affect her going forward? Second, the hospital then put a person in that job that's not a good fit. They spent money and resources to train them, and boom, it didn't work out. And now they have to start all over again.
Yep.
So the fit, right person, right job, and the fit needs to be assessed.
Then if I could add one more thing to that,
Please.
the staffing company's reputation
Yes.
is dinged in so many ways, because how much are we actually spending time to get to know that person? And obviously people are unpredictable. That's just the way of the world. That's the way of staffing. But there are ways that we can tell if that person is a good fit for the specific role. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. That's absolutely great. So as we transition to this next red flag, especially when we're talking about staffing companies, talk about unresponsiveness. I've heard so many stories in the past of somebody going on an assignment, and then all of a sudden they don't hear from their recruiter until it's time to extend again, and it becomes a massive, massive problem, not only for the traveler but also for the staffing company, because it's even for the client as well, because if nobody's communicating, where are we going with this? How do we know what's going on in the mind of our traveler? How do we know if we need to fix something? So that's what I'll actually share with you or ask you. If somebody has this issue and basically they're saying, I got to my assignment and did not hear from my recruiter again until I was near the possibility of extension, what should I do?
So, huge red flag, definitely a problem. Most of us who travels for the adventure. At least I did anyway. I'm going to tell you I did. I loved being dropped into a city or a town somewhere that I had never been in my entire life. My first assignment was up in the east on the northeast corridor, and it happened to be the worst winter up there of that year. So, you're dropped in. It's an adventure, but that's a good thing. But the bad thing is you are out there alone, and you should not feel alone. You should not feel as if you have nobody that has your back. So if you cannot reach your recruiter and your recruiter is unresponsive and you're having a problem, that is just a huge red flag. Um, yeah, how to fix it? I would think avoid it in the first place. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
if you sense that your recruiter is not going to be responsive, then you probably need to work with somebody else. So try to avoid getting into that situation. But if you are in that situation, then you may have to be very strong and push a little bit and say, "Hey, I'm out here alone. I need you to know I have my back. I'm having a problem," or whatever's going on. Because we all know these assignments are challenging. They're challenging assignments. We are going in to fix something in a clinical setting, and we have to know that we are there, that we're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you've always said, as a traveler, you're a guest in somebody's home, but it makes it very difficult when something is not right, and then on top of that, you're on an island. When you're on these assignments, you're on an island. You're in something. You're in a new environment, a new experience, and to not have the support or feel like you have the support of your staffing company or the company that you represent, it causes so many problems. So thank you for that. I appreciate that answer. So let's transition then, because there's also red flags when we talk about from a traveler's perspective with clients, and we got to be careful with how we approach this part of the conversation. But there are times, especially on an interview, where you might ask a question, and I know you've asked this question in the past, but it's maybe asking a question like, what is one of the biggest challenges your department is working through? And then there are times where the answers just come out so vague, and they can give you a wide range answer, like everything. It's almost like a misrepresentation. So what would your advice be, or how do you want to speak to that?
So I tell people that when you're doing your phone interview with your client, with your possible client, that you should always have a couple of questions that are just not this. Okay, what are going to be the standard? What are going to be my hours? What are blah blah? Those are like basic questions. Have something in mind that you personally feel is going to kind of drill down to the heart and the culture of that community, of that hospital or setting. So like I said, my favorite question is, what are the biggest challenges that your department's facing or your hospital is facing? And I expect an honest answer, because there is no perfect world out there.
Mm.
Every department, every hospital, every clinical setting is facing challenges. And I expect honesty from the person that I'm speaking with. And that, to me, if you get the, "Oh, we're so wonderful, you're just filling in while somebody's on maternity leave and it's just perfect here," there is no perfect. Something is wrong. And I think you have to kind of, again, feel comfortable drilling. If you really want to pursue this assignment, you need to drill that down a little bit further and say, have another response, a question, or something to say, to deal with that. Like I don't, without being confrontational.
Great. And then as you go on assignment, there are people that are stuck in situations where their leader is openly discussing their
Mm.
contract and in a variety of different ways. But how could they get through that situation, especially when they feel unwelcome and there's this possibility of extending, but they don't know if they want to do that or not? What advice would you give to those people?
So I've shared with John, I've been on several very challenging assignments with leadership. And you have to, if you really feel strongly about what's going on, about what your leader's saying or doing, you have to somehow find a way, if you can, to respectfully and professionally approach that leader. It could be an email message if you feel comfortable, saying that via email. Like, I'm concerned. I really want to, stay here and work with your hospital, but I'm concerned about what I'm hearing, or I'm concerned, whatever words you want to use. But if it's a respectful and professional way that you address it, you would be very surprised at the leader's response. And I've shared with John that I had one hospital that was a very tough assignment, extremely tough. And the leader and we had kind of formed a little bit of a bond before I said something. And one day I just kind of took her aside and I just kind of said, "Hey, can I share something with you?" And she was like, "Yeah, please." And I just said it. And it turned out that she heard that message loud and clear and actually was very glad to hear it.
Mm,
And it ended up putting her on a different trajectory, interestingly, because you never know what impact you can have on each individual.
love it.
One little thing I've always said to travelers is, whether it's a good assignment or a bad assignment, number one, you leave a part of you there when you leave. So
Mm,
you've left a footprint. Number two, they've also in some way changed you. So you've taken something away. So every time you have that interaction, this is a gift, whether it's I hope that it's a positive gift, but it's a gift that you can share with that leader and you can hopefully share with yourself as well.
love it. Tina, you are fantastic. That was a great answer. Um, I can't thank you enough for stopping by again. I know we've talked about this for quite some time, and I'm so excited to have you on. I'm glad you're feeling better too, by the way. And at the end of the day, if there's ever anything we can do for you, we're here for you at all times. Please come back to the Suitcase anytime.
Anytime. Thanks, Don.
All right, no problem. Well, if you have nothing else, I'm going to let you go, and then
Okay.
all right, well have a wonderful day. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right. Well, Tina Lipscomb, there you go. Tina's just she's another person that's been through it. Another person that has the experience and knows what to expect when being on travel assignments. So as we move forward with more red flags, I want you all to stay tuned. In our next episode, we're going to be discussing red flags from the perspective of the client. There's going to be approaches towards staffing companies that it's a concern for them, maybe a reason why they don't want to work with travelers. And then on top of that, they're going to also approach some red flags that come from travelers that come on board. Maybe it be from a professionalism standpoint or others. And we'll dive into that in the next episode. And as always, if you do have questions or possibly maybe even want to provide commentary on today's episode with Tina, please feel free to email the suitcase at norwood.com. We do appreciate you taking the time to listen today, and we'll see you next time on the Suitcase.